What if the greatest disaster in human history really happened? Imagine a world much like our own, full of cities, families, dreams, and ambitions. People woke up every morning to work, to laugh, to build their lives. Children played in the streets, markets were full. Life moved forward just as it always had. But beneath the surface, something had gone terribly wrong. According to the ancient account in Genesis, humanity had fallen into deep corruption. Violence had spread across the earth. Greed, cruelty, and injustice had become normal. People no longer cared about what was right. The world had become a place where selfishness ruled, and compassion had nearly disappeared. The Bible describes it in a chilling way. Every inclination of the human heart was bent toward evil. Imagine living in a world like that, a world where kindness was rare, a world where trust was broken, a world where darkness seemed to grow stronger every day. But even in that broken world, one man stood out. His name was Noah. While the rest of humanity walked a path of corruption, Noah chose a different way. He lived with integrity. He walked faithfully with God. And because of that, he was chosen for a task that would seem impossible to anyone else. A command so strange, so unbelievable, that it would take decades of faith to complete. God told Noah to build a massive ark, not near the ocean, not beside a river, but on dry land. And soon, the skies would open in a way the world had never seen before. A flood so powerful it would reshape the entire earth. But what really happened on Noah's Ark, and why does this ancient story still fascinate millions of people around the world today? To understand that, we have to go back to the beginning. Before we dive deeper into the story, I want to ask you something. Do you believe the story of Noah's Ark was a real historical event, a massive flood that truly changed the world? Or do you think it's a symbolic story meant to teach powerful lessons about faith, human nature, and second chances? People have debated this question for centuries, and every perspective is fascinating. So I'd love to hear from you. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I read as many comments as I can, and your thoughts might even inspire future videos on this channel. And if you enjoy stories like this, consider subscribing for more powerful Bible stories explained. Long before the floodwaters ever touched the earth, the world had already begun to drown in something far more dangerous: corruption. According to the book of Genesis, humanity had multiplied across the earth. Cities grew, families expanded. People farmed the land, built homes, traded goods, and formed communities. From the outside, civilization may have looked strong and prosperous, but deep within the human heart, something had begun to rot. The Bible describes this moment in history with chilling clarity. It says that the wickedness of mankind had become great upon the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. Think about that for a moment. Not just occasional wrongdoing, not just moments of weakness, but a society where evil had become the norm. Violence spread from place to place like wildfire. The strong took advantage of the weak. Power was abused. Greed ruled over compassion. People pursued their own desires without any concern for justice or mercy. Imagine waking up every day in a world where trust had disappeared, where promises meant nothing, where kindness was rare, where cruelty was rewarded instead of punished. Neighbors betrayed neighbors. Families were torn apart by selfish ambition. Those with power used it to dominate others. The earth itself, according to the biblical account, had become filled with violence.
This wasn't just a few corrupt individuals. It was an entire civilization spiraling out of control. Generation after generation drifted further away from what was right. The sense of moral direction that once guided humanity had faded. Instead of seeking goodness, people pursued pleasure, power, and control at any cost. The world had become unpredictable and dangerous. Children grew up learning that survival often meant becoming as ruthless as everyone else. Compassion was seen as weakness. Integrity was mocked. People who tried to live differently were often ignored, or worse, ridiculed. It was a dark time in human history. And according to the Bible, God saw everything. Nothing was hidden. Every act of violence, every lie, every betrayal. The Creator of the universe looked down at the earth, not with anger alone, but with sorrow, a deep sadness over what humanity had become. The world that was meant to be filled with life, harmony, and justice had turned into a place dominated by chaos and destruction. It was as if the moral foundations of society had completely collapsed. Imagine a world where nearly everyone around you had abandoned the idea of doing what is right, where honesty no longer mattered, where kindness was forgotten, where violence became normal. In that kind of world, it would be incredibly difficult to remain different. Most people simply followed the crowd. They adapted to the culture around them. They convinced themselves that corruption was just the way life worked. But not everyone. Amid the growing darkness, there was one man whose life stood in sharp contrast to everything happening around him. His name was Noah. While the world around him sank deeper into corruption, Noah chose another path. He lived differently. He believed in something greater than the chaos around him. He refused to become like everyone else. The Bible describes Noah as a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time. While others pursued selfish ambition and violence, Noah walked faithfully with God. Imagine how difficult that must have been, standing alone in a world that had forgotten what goodness looked like, choosing integrity in a society that rewarded corruption, remaining faithful when nearly everyone else had turned away. But it was exactly this difference that caught God's attention, because in a world drowning in corruption, there was one man who still walked with God.
In a world overwhelmed by corruption, violence, and moral collapse, Noah stood apart. We are not told that Noah was powerful, wealthy, or famous. He was not a king, a warrior, or a ruler of cities. Instead, the Bible introduces him in a very different way. Genesis simply tells us that Noah was a righteous man. That single description reveals something extraordinary. While the society around him had abandoned goodness, Noah chose to live with integrity. He did not allow the corruption of his world to shape who he was. Imagine what that must have looked like. When others cheated and lied, Noah chose honesty. When violence became normal, Noah chose peace. When people mocked faith and pursued their own desires, Noah continued to walk with God. Even the Bible says that Noah was blameless among the people of his time. This does not mean he was perfect. No human being is, but it means that his life was marked by sincerity, faithfulness, and moral courage. In a culture where darkness had become ordinary, Noah refused to let that darkness enter his own heart. But Noah was not alone. He had a family. Genesis tells us that Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. These sons would later play a crucial role in the future of humanity after the flood. Noah also had a wife, and his sons each had wives of their own. Together, they formed a small but faithful family unit in a world that had largely forgotten God.
Imagine the conversations that must have happened inside Noah's household. While the outside world pursued greed and violence, Noah likely taught his children about faith, about integrity, and about the importance of walking with God, even when others refused to do so. Raising a family in that environment could not have been easy. Every day, Noah and his family would have seen the corruption spreading around them. They would have witnessed injustice, cruelty, and selfishness becoming more common with each passing year. And yet, Noah remained faithful. That faith did not come from convenience, it came from conviction. He believed that even when the world turned away from God, the right path was still worth following. And because of that, something remarkable happened. Genesis tells us that Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. That phrase carries enormous meaning. While humanity as a whole had fallen into deep corruption, God saw something different when he looked at Noah. He saw a man who had not surrendered to the darkness around him, a man who still believed in obedience, righteousness, and faith. Out of an entire generation, Noah stood out, not because he sought attention, but because he remained faithful when almost no one else did. In many ways, Noah's story reminds us of a powerful truth. One person's integrity can stand out even in the darkest of times. One life of faith can shine brightly even when the world feels lost. But Noah had no idea what was about to happen. He could not have imagined the role he would soon be asked to play, because one day God spoke to Noah, and the message he received would not only change his life, it would change the course of human history itself. One day, God spoke to Noah with a message unlike anything anyone had ever heard before. The world, God said, had become completely corrupted. Violence filled the earth. Humanity had chosen destruction over righteousness, and the consequences of that corruption could no longer be ignored. A great judgment was coming. God told Noah that he would bring a flood upon the earth, waters so powerful that they would cover the land and destroy every living creature that breathed the breath of life. But Noah and his family would be spared, and the way they would survive was through something extraordinary. God gave Noah a command that must have sounded impossible. He told Noah to build an ark, not a small boat, not a simple shelter, a massive vessel, larger than anything that had ever been constructed at that time. According to the biblical account in Genesis, God gave Noah very specific instructions. The ark was to be 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high. To understand how large that is, imagine a structure roughly 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. That is about the length of 1.5 football fields. For ancient times, such a structure would have been staggering. The ark wasn't just big, it was designed carefully. God instructed Noah to build it out of gopher wood, a durable material suitable for a massive structure like this. The ark was to be sealed inside and out with pitch, making it waterproof. It would have 3 decks, allowing space for animals, supplies, and Noah's family. A roof would be built above it, along with a single door on the side. Everything about the ark was purposeful. It was not meant to sail across oceans like a ship. It was designed to survive, to float above the waters when the flood came. But imagine what this command must have felt like for Noah. First, there was the sheer scale of the task. Building something that enormous would take years, possibly decades. It required cutting massive amounts of wood, shaping beams, assembling the structure piece by piece. And Noah didn't have modern tools. There were no cranes, no power saws, no construction teams with advanced technology, just human effort, day after day, year after year. Then there was another problem. No one around Noah believed him. Imagine the scene. In the middle of dry land, far from any ocean, Noah begins constructing a gigantic ark. The frame grows larger every year. Wooden beams rise higher and higher into the sky. People walking past would have stared in disbelief. Why are you building that? What is it supposed to be? And when Noah explained that God had warned him about a coming flood, the reaction was probably laughter. Many must have mocked him. A flood? From the sky? Water covering the entire earth? To them, it must have sounded ridiculous. Some may have thought Noah had lost his mind. Others likely mocked him openly, turning the ark into a source of entertainment. Imagine the whispers spreading through nearby towns. That man Noah, he's building a giant boat in the middle of nowhere. 40 years he's been working on it, and he says rain is going to destroy the world. People laughed, but Noah kept building, hammer after hammer, beam after beam, year after year. His faith was stronger than the ridicule around him. Even when others doubted, mocked, or ignored him, Noah trusted that God's warning was real. And slowly, the impossible structure began to take shape. A massive ark standing silently under the open sky, a symbol of faith in a world that had forgotten how to believe. But the strangest part of God's plan was yet to come.
For years, the ark had stood as a silent mystery. Its massive wooden frame towered above the land, an impossible structure that had become the subject of endless jokes and rumors. Many people had watched Noah build it piece by piece, shaking their heads in disbelief. But then something strange began to happen. At first, it may have seemed small, a pair of animals walking across the landscape, 2 deer emerging from the trees, 2 wolves moving quietly through the fields. But soon the pattern became impossible to ignore. Animals were coming from everywhere. From distant hills, forests, and valleys, creatures began to appear. They walked calmly, almost as if guided by an unseen hand. 2 by 2, a pair of lions, 2 elephants, 2 giraffes towering above the crowd. Birds filled the sky overhead, while animals crossed the land below. Creatures both great and small moved in the same direction, toward the ark. Imagine standing there and watching it unfold. A line of animals stretching across the horizon, hooves striking the earth, wings fluttering above, the deep rumble of larger creatures echoing through the land. No cages, no ropes, no human commands, just animals arriving 2 by 2. The sight must have been astonishing. People who had spent years laughing at Noah now stood frozen, watching something they could not explain. The ark they had mocked was suddenly surrounded by living creatures from across the land. The impossible was happening right before their eyes. Genesis tells us that animals of every kind came to Noah: livestock, wild animals, creatures that crawled along the ground, and birds of every species. Each pair entered the ark, one by one, step by step. The enormous door stood open as the animals passed inside. Noah and his family guided them to their places within the massive structure. Inside the ark were multiple levels, carefully designed spaces where animals could be sheltered and cared for. Food had been gathered, supplies had been stored, everything had been prepared for what was coming. Outside, the gathering continued. Imagine the sheer variety of life arriving at the ark. Massive elephants lumbering forward beside tiny rabbits, colorful birds circling above, while reptiles crawled slowly across the ground. Every shape,
every size, every kind of creature moving together in quiet order. It must have looked surreal, a scene so strange that even the most skeptical observers might have felt a sudden chill of uncertainty, because something bigger than human understanding seemed to be unfolding. For decades, Noah had warned about the coming flood. Few believed him. But now, as the animals continued to arrive in perfect pairs, people began to realize that this might not be madness after all. Something extraordinary was about to happen. Then, once the animals had entered and Noah's family stepped inside, the ark stood ready, silent, waiting. And slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the sky began to change.
The moment had finally arrived. After years of preparation, after decades of warnings, the ark stood full and ready. Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives were all inside. The animals had entered in pairs, filling the massive structure with life. Outside, the world carried on as it always had. People continued their daily routines. They worked, traded, argued, and laughed. Many had likely watched the animals enter the ark with curiosity, but most probably dismissed it as just another strange event. Surely nothing catastrophic was about to happen. Surely life would continue as normal. But according to the book of Genesis, something remarkable happened next. God himself closed the door of the ark. That enormous wooden door, the only entrance to the vessel, was shut. Once it closed, no one could open it from the outside. The ark was sealed. Inside, Noah and his family waited. Outside, the sky hung heavy and quiet. And then it began. At first, it may have been only a few drops. Rain. For us today, rain is ordinary. But many scholars believe that before this moment, the world may not have experienced rainfall the way we do now. Instead, the earth was watered through mist and natural moisture rising from the ground. If that was true, then what came next would have been completely unfamiliar. The sky darkened, clouds gathered, and suddenly rain began to fall. Not just a light drizzle, not a passing storm. The rain poured down with relentless force, hour after hour, day after day. Genesis describes something even more dramatic. Not only did rain fall from the sky, but the fountains of the great deep burst forth. Waters erupted from beneath the earth itself, adding to the rising flood. The ground trembled, rivers overflowed, water surged across the land. Within a short time, the landscape began to change. Fields turned into lakes, roads disappeared beneath rushing currents, valleys filled rapidly as water spread across the earth. For those outside the ark, confusion quickly turned to fear. The rain did not stop. The sky remained dark. Day after day, the water kept rising. Imagine the panic that must have spread across towns and villages. People who had once laughed at Noah's warnings suddenly found themselves surrounded by water. Families ran to higher ground. Some likely tried to climb hills or mountains, hoping to escape the growing flood. But the rain continued. The waters kept rising. Genesis tells us that the rain fell for 40 days and 40 nights. For more than a month, the storm never stopped. Inside the ark, Noah and his family would have heard the constant sound of rain pounding against the wooden structure. The wind howled outside, while waves crashed against the sides of the vessel. But the ark held strong. Its massive design, built exactly according to God's instructions, was strong enough to survive the chaos. As the water level rose higher and higher, something incredible happened. The ark began to lift, slowly at first, then fully. The giant vessel that had once rested on dry land now floated above the floodwaters. Below it, the world was disappearing. Cities, Forests and fields were swallowed by the expanding sea. Entire landscapes vanished beneath the surface. Everything that had once seemed permanent was suddenly fragile. Genesis describes the flood in powerful terms. The waters rose so high that even the tallest mountains were eventually covered. The entire earth was overwhelmed. From the perspective of the ark, the view must have been both terrifying and surreal. An endless ocean stretching in all directions. No land, no cities, no familiar landmarks. Just water and the sky above. The ark drifted across this vast flooded world, carrying within it the last surviving humans and the animals that one day would repopulate the earth. Inside the ark, Noah and his family cared for the animals, preserved their supplies, and waited. Outside, the storm eventually faded. The rain finally stopped, but the waters remained. For months, water covered the earth.
While the floodwaters covered the earth, life inside the ark entered a long and uncertain season. The storm had passed, but the waiting had only begun. Inside the massive wooden structure, Noah and his family now lived in complete isolation from the outside world. The ark drifted across an endless ocean, surrounded by water in every direction. There were no cities, no forests, no mountains visible, only waves and sky. The world they once knew had vanished beneath the flood. Life inside the ark was far from quiet. The vessel held an enormous variety of animals, from powerful lions and massive elephants to tiny birds and crawling creatures. The ark was filled with movement, sound, and constant activity. Every day required work. Noah, his sons, and their wives had the responsibility of caring for all the animals on board. Food had to be distributed carefully. Water had to be managed. Living spaces had to be kept as clean as possible. Imagine the sounds echoing through the ark, the distant roar of lions, the trumpeting of elephants, the bleating of sheep and goats, birds fluttering their wings, animals shifting and moving across the wooden decks. The ark was not silent, it was alive, and maintaining that life required constant effort. Day after day, Noah's family likely followed a routine, feeding animals, checking supplies, cleaning spaces, and ensuring everything remained stable as the ark floated across the waters. But beyond the daily work, there was another challenge: waiting. No one inside the ark knew exactly how long the flood would last. Days passed, then weeks, eventually months. Imagine the emotional weight of that experience. Inside the ark, Noah and his family were safe, but they were also cut off from the entire world. Everything they had ever known had disappeared beneath the floodwaters. There were no signs of land, no clear timeline, only patience. At times, the isolation must have felt overwhelming. The same wooden walls, the same sounds of animals, the same endless horizon outside. But there was also something else inside the ark: hope. Noah had trusted God's warning when no one else believed. He had spent decades building the ark in obedience, and now, even while floating across a silent ocean, that same faith continued to guide him. The ark itself was a promise. It was proof that God had not abandoned them. Every sunrise that filtered through the small opening of the ark brought another reminder: they had survived. Life had been preserved. The future of humanity and the animal world rested within that floating sanctuary. And slowly, something began to change. Genesis tells us that after many months, God remembered Noah and the creatures with him inside the ark. Then a wind began to blow across the earth. The vast waters that had covered the world began to shift. Little by little, the flood started to recede.
The endless ocean that surrounded the ark was beginning to shrink, and for the first time since the storm began, the possibility of dry land started to return. But eventually, the waters began to fall.
As the months passed, the waters slowly began to retreat. Inside the ark, Noah and his family continued their daily routines, caring for the animals and watching the horizon for any sign that the flood was truly ending. The storm had long since stopped, but the earth was still covered by vast stretches of water. Then, one day, the ark came to rest. After drifting for months across the flooded world, the massive vessel settled on the mountains of Ararat. For the first time since the flood began, the ark was no longer moving. But even though the ark had stopped, the earth was not yet ready. Water still covered most of the land. The valleys were flooded, and the ground remained soaked beneath the receding waters. Noah needed to know when it would finally be safe to leave the ark. So he decided to send out a bird. Noah first released a raven. The dark bird flew out through the opening of the ark and disappeared into the sky. Ravens are strong, resilient creatures capable of surviving in difficult conditions. The raven flew back and forth across the waters, searching for places to land. But the Bible tells us that the raven never truly returned with news. It simply continued flying back and forth until the waters receded enough for land to appear. Noah waited. Days passed again. Still unsure whether the earth had dried enough for life to begin again, Noah tried something different. This time, he released a dove. Unlike the raven, the dove needed dry land to rest. It could not survive on floating debris alone. If the dove found land, it would stay. If not, it would return. The small white bird flew into the open sky. But after searching across the endless waters, the dove found no place to land. With nowhere else to go, it returned to the ark. Noah gently reached out and brought the bird back inside. 7 more days passed. Then Noah released the dove again. This time, something extraordinary happened. As the sun began to set, the dove returned, but it was not empty-beaked. In its mouth was a fresh olive leaf. That small leaf carried enormous meaning. Somewhere beyond the ark, trees had begun to grow again. Land was emerging from beneath the floodwaters. Life was returning to the earth. Hope had appeared. The olive leaf became a symbol that the flood was nearly over. But Noah waited 1 more week. After 7 more days, he released the dove a 3rd time. This time, the bird did not return. It had found a home. Dry land had finally appeared. After months of uncertainty, patience, and faith, the message was clear. The waters had receded. The world was ready to begin again. The flood was finally ending. As the months passed, the waters slowly began to retreat. Inside the ark, Noah and his family continued their daily routines, caring for the animals and watching the horizon for any sign that the flood was truly ending. The storm had long since stopped, but the earth was still covered by vast stretches of water. Then, one day, the ark came to rest. After drifting for months across the flooded world, the massive vessel settled on the mountains of Ararat. For the first time since the flood began, the ark was no longer moving. But even though the ark had stopped, the earth was not yet ready. Water still covered most of the land. The valleys were flooded, and the ground remained soaked beneath the receding waters. Noah needed to know when it would finally be safe to leave the ark. So he decided to send out a bird. Noah first released a raven. The dark bird flew out through the opening of the ark and disappeared into the sky.
Ravens are strong, resilient creatures capable of surviving in difficult conditions. The raven flew back and forth across the waters, searching for places to land. But the Bible tells us that the raven never truly returned with news. It simply continued flying back and forth until the waters receded enough for land to appear. Noah waited. Days passed again. Still unsure whether the earth had dried enough for life to begin again, Noah tried something different. This time, he released a dove. Unlike the raven, the dove needed dry land to rest. It could not survive on floating debris alone. If the dove found land, it would stay. If not, it would return. The small white bird flew into the open sky. But after searching across the endless waters, the dove found no place to land. With nowhere else to go, it returned to the ark. Noah gently reached out and brought the bird back inside. 7 more days passed. Then Noah released the dove again. This time, something extraordinary happened. As the sun began to set, the dove returned, but it was not empty-beaked. In its mouth was a fresh olive leaf. That small leaf carried enormous meaning. Somewhere beyond the ark, trees had begun to grow again. Land was emerging from beneath the floodwaters. Life was returning to the earth. Hope had appeared. The olive leaf became a symbol that the flood was nearly over. But Noah waited 1 more week. After 7 more days, he released the dove a 3rd time. This time, the bird did not return. It had found a home. Dry land had finally appeared. After months of uncertainty, patience, and faith, the message was clear. The waters had receded. The world was ready to begin again. The flood was finally ending.
After months of drifting across a flooded world, the moment Noah had been waiting for finally arrived. The ark had come to rest on the mountains of Ararat. Slowly, day by day, the waters continued to recede. The ground began to dry, and the earth that had once been completely submerged was beginning to reveal itself again. Inside the ark, Noah and his family waited patiently for God's instruction. Then one day, the command finally came. God told Noah it was time to leave the ark. Imagine the feeling in that moment. For more than a year, Noah and his family had lived inside the wooden vessel, surrounded by animals, cut off from the outside world, drifting across endless waters. The ark had become their shelter, their protection, and their entire universe. But now, the door was about to open. Slowly, the great door of the ark was unsealed. Light poured in. Fresh air rushed through the massive structure. And for the first time since the flood began, Noah stepped out onto dry land. Before him stretched a world that looked completely different from the one he remembered. The landscape had changed. Rivers had shifted. Forests were gone. The earth had been reshaped by the immense power of the flood. It was quiet, almost eerily quiet. Gone were the crowded cities and the noise of human civilization. The world felt new, untouched, as if creation itself had been given a second beginning. Behind Noah, the animals began to emerge. Pairs of creatures stepped out of the ark and onto the renewed earth. Birds took flight into the open sky. Animals scattered across the land, exploring their new home. Life was returning. Humanity had been given another chance. But before doing anything else, before building homes or planting fields, Noah did something deeply meaningful. He built an altar to the Lord. From the animals that had been set apart for sacrifice, Noah offered a burnt offering as an act of gratitude. It was a moment of worship, a moment of acknowledgement that their survival had not come from their own strength. It had come from God. The Bible describes how the offering was pleasing to the Lord, and in response, God made a powerful promise.
Never again would he destroy all life on earth with a flood. Despite the brokenness that still existed in the human heart, God declared that the cycles of the earth would continue: seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night. Life would move forward. Humanity had been given a new beginning, a fresh start in a world washed clean by the flood. And standing there on the renewed earth, Noah and his family became the beginning of a new chapter in human history.
After the flood had ended and life began to spread once again across the earth, God spoke to Noah and his family with a promise that would echo through generations. This promise was not just a simple statement, it was a covenant. In the Bible, a covenant is a sacred agreement, a commitment made by God that carries deep meaning and lasting significance. This covenant was not only for Noah and his sons, but for every living creature that would ever walk the earth. God declared that never again would a flood destroy all life on the planet. The catastrophe that had reshaped the world would not be repeated in the same way. The earth would continue. Seasons would come and go. Humanity would rise, fall, and grow, but the world itself would not be wiped away by another global flood. And to make sure that this promise would never be forgotten, God gave a visible sign, a sign that anyone could see: a rainbow. God said that whenever clouds gathered and rain fell upon the earth, the rainbow would appear in the sky as a reminder of this covenant. Its colors, stretching across the horizon, would stand as a symbol of God's promise, both to humanity and to every living creature. Think about how powerful that image is. After the greatest storm the world had ever known, the sky itself carried a message of hope. Every rainbow would remind people of a deeper truth, that even after judgment, mercy remains. It would become a symbol of renewal, of grace, and of the possibility of new beginnings. From that moment on, whenever rain clouds parted and sunlight broke through the sky, the rainbow would appear as a lasting sign of the covenant between God, humanity, and the earth itself.
Thousands of years have passed since the story of Noah and the Ark was first told. Empires have risen and fallen. Civilizations have come and gone. The world has changed in ways Noah could never have imagined. And yet, this ancient story continues to captivate millions of people around the world. Why? Because the story of Noah is about far more than a flood. At its heart, it is a story about faith. Noah lived in a world where doing the right thing was rare. Corruption surrounded him. People mocked him, doubted him, and likely called him foolish. Yet he continued to trust in God even when no one else did. Faith like that is not easy. It means believing in something greater than what others can see. It means staying true to your values even when the world around you chooses a different path. The story is also about obedience. When God gave Noah an impossible command to build a massive ark on dry land, Noah didn't argue, delay, or walk away. He obeyed. Year after year, he worked on something that must have looked ridiculous to everyone else, but his obedience ultimately saved his family and preserved life on earth. And finally, the story is about hope. After the storm, after the destruction, after the long months of waiting, a new world emerged. Life began again. The rainbow appeared as a reminder that even after humanity's darkest moments, renewal is still possible. That message still resonates today, because every generation faces its own storms. Every person faces moments when faith feels difficult, when obedience feels costly, and when hope feels far away.
But Noah's story reminds us that even in the darkest times, faith and perseverance can lead to a new beginning. And now, I want to ask you something. If you were in Noah's place, would you have had the faith to build the ark?
If you enjoyed this story and want to see more powerful Bible stories like this, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps the channel grow and allows us to continue sharing these incredible stories with more people. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Noah's Ark was a real historical event, or do you see it as a powerful symbolic story about faith and humanity? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you're interested in more fascinating biblical stories, be sure to check out our next video about the story of Moses and the parting of the Red Sea.